They found the room sealed behind brick, behind plaster, behind a wall that had no reason to be there. It was discovered by accident in the winter of 1911, when the old mansion on Blackwood Hill was finally being torn apart plank by plank. The workers said the air changed when the wall came down. Not colder, not warmer, just heavier, like something had been waiting too long to breathe again. Inside was a narrow chamber. No windows, no door, just a dirt floor worn smooth, as if someone had paced there for years. Scratches covered the beams, hundreds of them, fingernail marks, deep and desperate, and carved into the central post, over and over again, in uneven letters, was a single sentence. I built this place. I am not allowed inside. No records mentioned a room like this. No blueprints. No family letters. The mansion had stood since 1838, owned by one of the most respected men in the county. A church donor, a judge, a man whose portrait hung in every public building for 50 miles. But this room had been erased, and whoever had lived in it had been erased too. By nightfall, the workers refused to stay. One of them swore he heard someone counting in the dark, slow and careful, like a man measuring time by breath instead of clocks. The mansion was demolished anyway. The room was filled in with dirt and stone. The scratches disappeared, but the sentence survived, because someone copied it down, and because the man who carved it had left more behind than anyone realized. The mansion on Blackwood Hill was famous long before anyone noticed what was wrong with it. Locals called it a miracle house, built in less than 2 years. No architect credited. No construction delays. Every joint perfect. Every staircase balanced so precisely that a marble would roll from top to bottom without drifting even an inch. The official story was simple. The master had good workers. Loyal ones. Silent ones. But plantation records from the 1830s tell a stranger story. One name appears again and again in ledgers, but never with a last name. Just a single word written in careful ink. Eli. No age listed. No birthplace. No family ties. His name is attached to measurements. Load counts. Structural notes. Corrections. Eli recalculated beams. Eli redesigned the east wing after the first floor settled. Eli corrected the chapel ceiling so it would not collapse under snow. Eli was not listed as a carpenter. He was listed as property. And yet the mansion bears his mind in every detail. The ironwork patterns repeat symbols found nowhere else in the county. The angles of the windows follow no known style. The house almost feels intentional, as if it were designed to observe the people inside it. Still, one rule was absolute. Eli was forbidden to enter the mansion once it was completed. Not the parlor, not the chapel, not even the cellar. Witnesses later claimed he slept in a lean-to behind the house he had designed, rain leaking through the roof, while candles burned inside rooms he would never step foot in. And when asked why, the master gave the same answer every time. Some things are not meant to cross their own thresholds. The master of Blackwood Hill was known as a righteous man. He spoke loudly in church. He funded orphan homes. He lectured others about order, obedience, and divine hierarchy. His sermons were copied and distributed across the region. But private letters reveal a man deeply afraid. He wrote often of the house watching him, of footsteps at night that followed his own, of dreams where the walls leaned inward, whispering measurements and numbers he did not understand. He began locking doors that did not lead anywhere. Most disturbing of all were his instructions regarding Eli. Do not allow him inside. One letter reads, not even after my death. Another states, he knows the bones of this place. That knowledge must not be turned inward. The master believed something terrible would happen if Eli crossed the threshold. Not rebellion, not revenge, recognition. Because Eli had not just built the mansion, he had encoded it. Every hallway aligned with something older than the land deeds. Every beam placed according to calculations that did not belong to Christian architecture. The chapel's dimensions matched ratios found in burial pits, not churches. The master feared that if Eli ever walked freely inside the house would remember who it belonged to. And so the rule remained. Until the night the master died alone in his locked bedroom, and the keys vanished. They say Eli did not hesitate. When the master's body was found the next morning, stiff and staring at the ceiling, the servants whispered that Eli was already gone. No one saw him take the keys. No one heard him enter the house. But that night, for the first time since its completion, a single candle burned in every room. Neighbors reported lights moving slowly, methodically, as if someone were walking through each space with purpose. Not wandering, inspecting. By dawn, Eli was found asleep on the chapel floor. Alive, crying. He would not speak for 3 days. When he finally did, it was not about freedom, not about justice, not even about cruelty. He said only this: "The house is wrong. It remembers everything. It remembers me most." Within a week, Eli began working again. Not building, correcting. Walls were reinforced, passages sealed, symbols scratched into beams and then hidden behind plaster. A narrow room was constructed inside an existing wall, a room no one was meant to find. When asked why he was doing this, Eli answered calmly, "If I don't give the house somewhere to put what it knows, it will put it into people." This was the last statement ever recorded from him. By the end of the year, Eli was gone. No grave, no sale record, only a mansion that stood perfectly still for decades. After Eli vanished, the mansion did not fall silent. It became orderly, too orderly. New owners came and went, but they all made the same changes without speaking to one another. They reinforced the same walls. They blocked the same staircases. They avoided the same rooms, claiming they felt wrong, though none could explain why. Children raised in the house learned things they were never taught. A boy in 1862 could calculate load weight by sight alone. A girl in 1871 drew floor plans of the mansion from memory despite never seeing the upper floors. They did not call it learning. They called it remembering. The church across the road began using the mansion as an example in sermons. "A house built on discipline," the pastor said. "A place where every part knows its role." No one noticed that the sermon started echoing the same phrases carved long ago into Eli's beams. Order above mercy, structure above life, silence above truth. People who stayed in the mansion too long developed habits they could not break. Walking measured steps, counting breaths, touching walls when anxious, as if checking for something behind them. The house was no longer shelter. It was instruction. In 1889, the mansion was donated to the church. It became an orphanage. The children slept in narrow rows. Beds aligned perfectly. If one bed shifted, the floorboards creaked until it was corrected. Caretakers complained that the building punished disorder. Children who cried at night were often found standing silently in corners by morning, unable to explain how they got there. Some began carving into the walls. Not pictures, not names, measurements. One boy scratched the exact dimensions of the sealed room behind the west wing wall, a room he had never seen and should not have known existed. Another child whispered at night about a man who counted with him so he would not be afraid. The staff dismissed this as imagination, until a child disappeared. No footprints, no broken locks, just an empty bed and a faint smell of wet earth inside the walls. The church sealed the west wing shortly after. They said it was for safety, but the children said the house was hungry. Section 7. What Eli left behind. Years later, during renovations, a hidden ledger was discovered beneath the chapel floor. It was not written like a diary. It was written like an apology. Eli had been documenting his corrections, not to the building, but to the harm already done. He believed the mansion had absorbed suffering during its construction. Every lash, every command, every night he slept outside its walls while shaping its bones. "Pain," he wrote, "does not disappear. It settles." The house had become a container for it. Eli's final entries are shaky, rushed. "I tried to give it rooms," he wrote. "I tried to give it walls thick enough to hold memory. But memory leaks." He believed the mansion would eventually teach others what it had learned from him. Endurance without mercy, precision without compassion, silence as survival, and worst of all, obedience mistaken for peace. Eli did not curse the house. He tried to limit it, and he failed. In 1911, the same year the sealed room was discovered, the orphanage shut down without warning. Church records list structural concerns. What they do not list are the bodies. 3 children were found unresponsive in their beds. No marks, no illness, just expressions of absolute exhaustion, as if they had held something heavy for too long and finally let go. One caretaker was discovered inside the walls, wedged between beams, hands raw from clawing at wood that would not give. She had carved a sentence into the beam with her fingernails. "It won't let me forget." The church sold the property immediately. By the time demolition crews arrived, Locals refused to go near the place after sunset. They said the house whispered through cracks, counting softly, like someone making sure everything was still where it belonged. And deep inside the walls, a room waited, still holding, still remembering. After the orphanage closed, Blackwood Hill should have emptied. Instead, the town grew quieter. People stopped asking questions. Not suddenly, slowly, like a habit forming. Conversations ended early. Town meetings shortened. Confessions in church became vague, careful, stripped of detail. The mansion still stood, boarded and abandoned, yet its influence leaked outward. Homes nearest the hill began copying its order. Furniture aligned with walls. Children disciplined not for disobedience, but for improvisation. Parents praised stillness. Teachers rewarded silence more than understanding. The town learned structure and forgot warmth. Older residents complained of dreams where hallways stretched longer than they should, where doors led back to the same room again and again. They woke up counting their breaths, hands pressed flat against bedroom walls. No one spoke of it openly. They didn't need to. The town had learned what the house had learned long ago, that survival sometimes feels like obedience. The church sermons shifted in tone. Scripture was still quoted, but meanings bent. Compassion was described as weakness, mercy as disorder, suffering as proof of design. The pastor began referencing invisible rooms of the soul, spaces meant to contain pain so it wouldn't spill into the world. The language matched Eli's ledger almost word for word. No one questioned where it came from. Congregants reported feeling calm during services. Numb, but calm. As if something heavy had been set down inside them, sealed behind walls they couldn't see. Children raised under these sermons grew into adults who followed rules without knowing why. They corrected others instinctively. They fixed crooked picture frames in strangers' homes. They felt anxiety when things were out of place, as if the town itself had become a smaller version of the mansion. In 1909, a schoolteacher named Samuel Reed began noticing something strange. He mapped the town. Not roads, not property lines, behaviors. He tracked where people stood during conversations, where they paused while walking, where they hesitated before speaking. The patterns matched the mansion's original floor plan, even though most townspeople had never been inside it. Samuel believed the house had imprinted itself onto the community. That trauma, once structured, could replicate. He wrote letters to state officials warning them that Blackwood Hill was architecturally conditioned. No one responded. Weeks later, Samuel was found inside the abandoned mansion, standing in the sealed west wing, staring at a wall. He had drawn the hidden room perfectly on the floor in chalk. He did not remember doing it. He was sent away. The chalk was washed clean, but the room remained. By the time demolition was approved, the mansion was barely necessary. The town had absorbed it. People enforced its rules on one another. Silence, order, endurance. Pain kept neatly inside. When workers uncovered the sealed room, something changed. Those present described a feeling of release. Not relief. Pressure. Like a container opened too quickly. That night, the town experienced its first collective event. Dozens of people woke at the same hour. Same dream. Same image. A man standing outside a door he built, listening to others live inside it. The dream ended when the door finally opened, and something moved past him. By morning, several residents had left town without explanation. Others stayed, but something in them had shifted. They corrected themselves mid-sentence. Stopped laughing too loudly. Avoided doors. The house was gone, but what it taught had already moved on. For decades, people believed Eli was only fixing mistakes. But the ledger tells a different story. Eli realized too late that the mansion was never neutral. It had been shaped under fear, ownership, and humiliation. Every command shouted during its construction had sunk into the wood. Every night Eli slept outside, while shaping rooms for others had taught the house a lesson it never forgot. That some lives exist to build comfort for others. Eli believed buildings could learn this. And worse, could preserve it. The sealed room was not a prison. It was a sink. A place designed to pull suffering inward, away from people. A pressure chamber for memory. Eli hoped that if pain was given structure, it could be contained. But pain does not want containment. It wants witnesses. Eli understood that the house would eventually seek new minds if the room ever opened. So he made one final decision. He didn't leave the mansion. He entered it fully. No burial records exist for Eli because there was no body to bury. But work logs reveal something chilling. Food deliveries continued long after his disappearance. Water buckets were replaced weekly. Candles were consumed inside sealed spaces. Someone was still there. Eli had sealed himself into the hidden room. Not as punishment, as restraint. He became the final barrier between the house and the world. A living anchor, holding memory in place by remembering it himself. The scratches on the beams were not madness. They were counting. Days, breaths, years. He stayed until his body failed. And when he died, the house was left alone with everything he had been holding back. When the demolition crew broke into the sealed room in 1911, they did more than uncover a secret. They removed a weight. Eli had been acting as a living seal. With his death long past, the room had been fragile but intact. Opening it allowed the mansion's stored memory to disperse, not as ghosts, as habits, as instincts, as values that feel reasonable until you question them. That is why the town changed so quickly afterward. Why silence felt comforting. Why obedience felt safe. Why suffering became private instead of shared. The house did not haunt people. It taught them, and they listened. Church leaders quietly removed records. Town officials destroyed maps. Families stopped telling stories. Not because they didn't believe, because they did. The idea that suffering can be built into systems, into institutions, into traditions, was too dangerous. If Eli's story were true, then cruelty wasn't accidental. It was architectural. So they buried his name. They demolished the house. They pretended the room never existed. But the pattern survived. In churches that value silence over healing. In families that praise endurance but never ask what it costs. In towns where order feels more important than truth. Eli was erased because remembering him would mean questioning the walls we still live inside. When the sealed room was opened, only one clear sentence remained untouched by rot or time. I built this place. I am not allowed inside. For years, people assumed it was about slavery, about exclusion, about cruelty. But Eli's ledger reframes it. He was not talking about the mansion. He was talking about America. About systems built by hands that were never meant to benefit from them. About institutions shaped by suffering, then sealed shut so no one would have to look inside and see what they were made of. Eli built something precise, efficient, enduring, and then he was told it was not his. The house learned that lesson perfectly. There were no monsters in Blackwood Hill, no blood-soaked corridors, no curses spoken aloud. That was the real horror. The house didn't destroy people. It trained them. It taught them how to live with pain quietly, how to mistake control for safety, how to believe silence is strength. That is why the story lasted. Because nothing about it felt unnatural. It felt familiar. The mansion is gone, but places like it are everywhere. Buildings that reward obedience over care. Families that teach children not to speak about what hurts. Churches that turn suffering into virtue. Towns that value order more than truth. These are Eli's houses. Still standing, still teaching, and still telling people they are not allowed inside the systems they built. The hidden room was not meant to be sealed forever. It was meant to be acknowledged. Eli believed that pain, when named, loses its power to shape everything else. The room failed because no one wanted to look inside. So here it is now, opened again, not as a haunting, as a warning. If suffering is buried instead of healed, it doesn't disappear. It becomes structure. And one day, you wake up living inside it, correcting yourself, quieting yourself, carrying weight you never agreed to hold. Eli held it as long as he could. Now the question is simple. What are we still building? That we are forbidden to enter?